what's shaking, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Orange Bloods Friday Prediction Show here on the Orange Bloods Texas Football Channel. I'm Jeff Ketchum, joined by Alex Dunlap, Anwar Richardson. This show brought to you by Prize Picks. If you go to Prize Picks right now, they will 100% deposit match your initial deposit up to $100. Use the promo code Orange Bloods. Let them know that we sent you. I have been doing pretty well on Prize Picks over the course of the last week or so.
Have you? Give us? Let us know, Catch, because I've done well myself. I'm entering this into feeling really good today. I ain't gonna lie.
I'm up like 700 in the last week.
Oh, that's real good.
And most of that came last Saturday on a perfect 5 of 5 power play on Prize Picks.
Why didn't you give that thing out in the Slack, Catch?
I did. And we talked about it like as the day, because I had a bunch of Texas guys. Yeah. So, in fact, let me just look at it real quick. I'll tell you what my winners were on that, because it was I rode the success of Texas players against Iowa State to actually cashing in on. That was a $400 win. It was a $40 power play, and I ended up hitting. I had Blake. No, where was it at? I had so much action going last. Okay, here we go. So I had Quinn Ewers with more than 2 touchdowns. Mm-hmm. I had Xavier Worthy with more than 59.5 yards.
Xavier finally came through.
And I had more of Bijan at 108.5 rushing yards. And then my 2 non-Texas plays where I had more on 76.5 Eric Gray rushing yards. The Oklahoma running back. And then I hit Jordan Addison, the USC wide receiver, at more than 80.5. Hit on all 5 of those. It was a $40. Actually, it was a $40 flex play. It still paid out, though, 10 times the money. So that was a $400 win.
Nice.
I won 100. Yeah, no,
that's awesome.
I had lost the 9 previous entries that I had submitted. But this week I've hit on. I've won. Like I said, I'm up about $700, including a nice little win playing some soccer entries yesterday.
So, Catch, they also had. We talked about it last week. They had like a power play, and Blake was aware of it, where they gave you a Steph Curry at a 0.5 points. So that was a power play, and then I just threw in Anthony Davis versus Golden State. Get at more than 22.5 points. I was like, I'll just do it. I was like, LeBron's going to facilitate. This should be good. And he scored 27. And so, for a $20 entry, I took home $60 on that one. And then
I was able to get in on that too. I did text Steph Curry versus Steph Curry and this dude Tyrese Maxey, who I don't even know who it was, but I went over to Roto.
That's my boy.
I went over to Roto Grinders and looked at all the projections that they had for the night's DFS slate, and they had him projected for like 10 more fantasy points than Prize Picks. So I just did those 2 as well. The most you could bet was $20. So I got a $60 hit there, but I've been nowhere near as hot as Catch. I was 1 off from a big 10X last week in NFL, but damn, Geno Smith had to turn back into a pumpkin. If he could have got me 16.5 fantasy points, he's done that. He's done that in all but 1 game all season. It's just hurt so bad.
Can I tell you the one I got hurt? I got hurt on the NFL as well, where I got 4 out of 5, but I missed on the 10 timeser. You know who got me? Who? Freaking Zeke Elliott. He had 72.5 rushing and receiving yards, and I was like, he's not getting anywhere near that. He had like 8 yards at halftime.
He looked spry, didn't he?
And then in the second half, they just were feeding him the football. Yeah. And in the end, he went way above 72. So it wasn't like I got hurt by like 0.5 or something like that. But I was 4 for 4, and I was about to go back-to-back 10-time winners on college and pro. And then awesome. In a game that didn't even help Zeke Elliott's yardage, did not help the Cowboys win. Yeah. So I picked Zeke because I was like, well, if he fails and the Eagles win, at least I win in the process. And instead, the Eagles still won the damn game, and Zeke almost had 100 yards. So thanks for nothing. We are talking to you primarily. We'll get to our favorite Prize Picks entries on the Texas-Oklahoma State game. I've already got my action in. I'll probably get more in for the weekend, but I've already made at least one before they raise the numbers. But if we talk about our Texas-Oklahoma State predictions for Saturday, I think we were talking about this just before we came on the air, but the implied number based on over and under and all of the stuff that Vegas has for the game is a 33-27-ish Texas win over Oklahoma State. Alex, I'll come to you first. Does your prediction look anything like the implied score?
I think it's going to, because I'm finding myself in a spot where I feel less confident about my take on this game than I felt about anyone so far this season. So I think I'm just going to kind of lean on the wisdom of crowds and, the fact that all those big casinos didn't, those big sports books didn't build themselves, and they generally know something, and probably stayed pretty close to what the implied team totals here are, simply because I could really see this thing going a lot of ways. I'm like you, Catch. Before the season started, I would have said, if you'd have told me Texas is a 2-loss team coming into this game and Oklahoma State is a 1-loss team coming into this game, who do you think is going to win the game? I said, well, based on everything that I knew during the 2021 season, I would say Oklahoma State's they're going to win versus Texas on the road. At that point in time, the only road win that Texas has had was the one versus TCU. So how much has this season changed my perception of this football team? Well, it's changed my perception of this football team a good bit. So I'm just having trouble weighing the two things. I want to pick Texas to win because I think Texas is playing a good brand of football right now. I don't know exactly how it's going to go down, because I don't feel like this Texas team has given us a product yet that we have enough things stacked up in a row to where I feel like I can consistently count on it to give this kind of output and to operate in this kind of specific way, especially in a game that's a true road game and not one that's a neutral site matchup.
Mr. Richardson, what about you?
Yeah, this is I talked about it on one of my shows this week. This is kind of a tough one for me because on paper, Oklahoma is just not that good. And more so, their defense isn't that good. Oklahoma enters this game with the 10th ranked defense in the Big 12, Catch. They're giving up an average of 447 yards per game. They're ranked 10th against the pass in the Big 12. They're giving up 301 yards per game, and they're ranked 10th against the rush at 207 yards per game. And the Catch, they are tied for 8th as far as opponent red zone conversions. They've had 20 of 23 scores against them in the red zone, 15 touchdowns, 5 field goals. So if you pretty much get down in the red zone against Oklahoma, you're probably scoring a touchdown. Very rarely do you have to settle for a field goal. So I look at this and I'm like, this defense is just not that good. Like, there's no parts of that. Now, what throws me off a little bit about this defense, which it makes it odd, is that, but when you also look at them, they are actually tied for first in sacks in the Big 12. Which they have 17 sacks in the Big 12, and they're actually first in opponent third down conversion as far as getting off the field. Opponents are only converting 26% of their third downs against this team, which kind of tells me, we got to look at the story. It sounds like Oklahoma State is probably really bad on first and second downs. And then for whatever reasons on third downs, they're just blitzing, and then sometimes they're finding ways to get to the quarterback. But overall, on paper, this defense is just not that good. So overall, when I look at this offensive line of Texas, and Alice can speak to how good this offensive line has been this year, it looks like an offensive line that should be able to have success, even though the strength of this Oklahoma State defense is actually on the defensive line.
Or was. I don't know if you just got that slack from
No, that guy's not a starter. Oh, okay. Not this year anyway. Like, that shouldn't impact – we just got a notice that Brandon Evers, Oklahoma State defensive tackle, is foregoing the rest of this season and is going to go pro and get ready for the draft. And I was like, what kind of impact guy has that guy been this season?
Yeah,
he's got like 3 tackles.
Oh.
That was I wonder if there's a backstory to that one, because there's a reason why. Is it like me announcing to the world that I'm not dating Halle Berry just because?
It is a little bit, but he's worthy of being mentioned because he's a former 14-game starter just a year ago on a team that competed for the Big 12 championship, but hasn't recovered from those injuries in a way that's made him any kind of meaningful player for that defense this year. So I think he probably is like, there's no reason for me to keep even bothering with this Oklahoma State thing. It's time for me to get ready for the NFL and get healthy, is what it looks like.
Yeah, which then it goes into what that mentality is like in a locker room, where you're just like mid-season, you're cutting it off. And so then what conversations have been happening behind the scenes, like, I don't know. So I just know that this defense doesn't look good, Catch. And I know this offense, I feel a little bit more confident with Quinn Ewers. Now, the big test, Rob, obviously, is the road game, right? Texas has only had one true road victory under Steve Sarkisian, which was last year versus TCU. But when we start thinking about Quinn Ewers, and the thing that people just compliment him on is that he's not up, he doesn't get down, he's just kind of here the entire time. So when you go into a hostile environment, you probably need a guy like Quinn, who's not going to be riding the emotional roller coaster, but that's actually just going to be a guy that says what it means what it says. He's just going to say yes sir, no sir, and then go about his business. So because of that, I'm going to give Texas the advantage of it in this one. When we get to our score predictions, I'll probably predict a close score. It wouldn't surprise me if it went a little bit more for the Texas thing. But again, the only other thing is, how does everybody else react? I think Quinn's going to be fine, but it's going to be, how does everyone else react? And if Spencer Sanders does play and then do that dual threat that's in there, how does this Texas defense react to dual threat quarterbacks that typically give Texas a lot of trouble?
I think Quinn Ewers could throw for 400 yards on Saturday, even with the knowledge that the wind's going to be a bit of an issue. The Texas passing game's not predicated on the long ball. It'd be different if the pathway for Ewers, and look, Ewers got a cannon anyway. I mean, if anybody is going to be able to throw through the wind with success, it's going to be a guy with the kind of arm talent that he has. But Texas isn't going 40 yards down. They're not making their big plays necessarily through long balls. They can throw the ball short and in the intermediate to a number of their players and create big plays in the passing game. Oklahoma State's been so bad in the passing game that, for me, there's no doubt that Texas is in the 30s. I wonder how Oklahoma State gets into the 30s, because I don't know what I think of that team coming into this game. But I think Spencer Sanders will play. I think they'll give him the needle or whatever it is that he needs to get onto the field. I think he'll give Texas problems, because Texas had problems a week ago with a poor man's version of Spencer Sanders and the kid from Iowa State. We've seen Frank Harris have some success, and obviously we saw the kid from Texas Tech have some success. Guys that can run and throw, just the idea of that has given Texas problems throughout this season. I think we're talking about a 35-35 game that goes into overtime. And then I think the special teams edge in the kicking game ends up being the difference in this game. I'm going to go Oklahoma State 38, Texas 35. Bert Auburn misses a field goal in overtime, and Oklahoma State makes theirs. And I think that in a game that really – if I tell you that a game's going to overtime, that's as 50-50 as it means I think they're tied after 60 minutes. I think Quinn Ewers could throw 4 touchdowns in this game. Like, we're going to get to the prize pick stuff in a second. I'm a big fan of the Texas passing game this weekend on prize picks. I do think there may be a couple of turnovers baked in. I think this may be the week where we see Quinn have a crooked number in the turnover game. And it made the difference in last week's game, and it might just make the difference in this week's game. I cannot give the Texas team the benefit of the doubt this week the best way for them to earn the benefit of the doubt for me going into Manhattan in 2 weeks is that they give a really good performance this week, but they haven't done it yet. Like Anwar, like you mentioned, 1-5 in true road games under Sarkisian. Most of those games they either should have won or been a lot more competitive in than they were. I'm just not quite ready to say that I think Texas is definitely going to win a game like this, even if I think they're the better team. So I've got Oklahoma State 38-35 in overtime. The kicking game edge that might be the only edge that Oklahoma State has, I think ends up being the difference in this. I think Oklahoma State might score on defense tomorrow. So, you know, a lot of things in play here to consider, but I'll be the bad guy. I really don't know. Like I've told Anwar a couple times this week, I'm close to flipping my pick. But in the end, that would mean giving Texas the benefit of the doubt before it's earned. And that's exactly what I said before the Texas Tech game. Texas Tech was a game that I thought Texas should win, but it's a game that throughout the offseason I thought they would struggle in. I've thought that about Oklahoma State for the last 9 months. I may be panicking a little bit and wanting to flip my pick, but I'm going to hold the rope. I'm going to hold steady and go with the thing that I said would happen before this season, which is an Oklahoma State win. I hope I'm wrong, but that's going to be my official pick.
Well, here's a good thing for Texas fans. The last time you predicted an OT game, it was for Texas OU.
Yes, sir.
And it was 49-0. So if Catch is predicting overtime, go ahead and take the over.
Well, here's the thing. If Texas wins by like 3 touchdowns or more, I will pick Texas to win an over. I'll have an overtime game in every game the rest of the season.
Fair enough.
We will ride that out. All right, let's talk about our favorite entries over at Prize.
You didn't get our score predictions yet.
Oh, I thought I did.
No.
Okay. We'll give you a pick.
Yeah,
hey, what time's kickoff in this game?
2:30.
It doesn't change anything for me. I'll just give my pick. I'm gonna pick Texas to win. I have a hard time picking Texas to cover. I feel like this line's too big. I have a hard time picking them to cover. They showed last week that they can win close games. I'm going to need to see that out of them. Well, I mean, it's something.
You're right.
I'm going to pick Texas to win because I have the same hesitations Catch does. I wonder if these winds, is this going to be 22-mile-an-hour sustained winds or gusts? That's a big deal once you get up above 18 miles per hour as far as the way it affects a football game, at least in NFL studies. But assuming it's gusts, I don't think it's going to affect the Texas passing game. I think it'll affect the Texas kicking game because that's so very weak right now. I'm going to pick Texas to win 35-30 and not cover, but win.
All right, Anwar, let's hear yours.
Yeah, I think, look, I think I've been a little bit more, on the pro Texas side and a little bit more of a buy-in there. So I won't go too far away from where I've been over the last several weeks. So I'm going to take Texas 35-27. I think at the end of the day, give me even if there's wins, you tell me you got to rely on Bijan Robinson or Roshan Johnson or Keelan Robinson. I think that's pretty good. I think that's probably be better than what Oklahoma State can offer as far as the rushing attack is concerned. If you got to go ground, if you got to go to the ground game, and again, Alex has these kind of stats as far as missed tackles and things to that effect. I think for the most part, Texas has been good as far as the tackling team is concerned. So if the win is an issue and this thing has to be a ground and pound thing, I'll take my chances with Bijan Robinson and Roshan Johnson as a primary back. So give me Texas 35-27, as far as the victory is concerned going into the bye week.
That's completely fair, Anwar. Like this game's so close that everybody's talking sense, even if we're not all picking the same thing, if that makes sense. Over on the Prize Pick side of things, they put the Texas, because now Quinn Ewers is healthy. Prize Picks is able to put the Texas entries in much earlier than they have in previous weeks. I don't know if Blake can go full screen with this or not. I looked them over. I've got 3 that I'm really high on. I like Quinn Ewers to eat. Look, 281 yards, if I'm not mistaken, is his career high. I think he breaks that with ease this weekend. So I love the more than 275.5. In the process, I love Xavier Worthy having 70.5. Oklahoma State let TCU wide receiver Quentin Johnston have a huge game last week. To me, Xavier Worthy might have 70 at halftime. And then I think after a fairly quiet week, he had 5 targets, but he didn't have it wasn't a super contributor to this game. On the road is where you want your tight end play to really be a factor. This has a Sanders game written all over it.
Yeah, dude. I like that.
And Prize Picks has him with 40.5 yards listed. I think this is a week where he's in the 70 or 80 yard range, if not more. Those are my 3. I'm going to pair that up.
How are you allowed to do? That's a super correlated pick too. That's a super correlated.
You have to make my next 2 picks. You need to do
another. You need to have some other, because you can't have them from the same team. But what you can do, and what Ketchum did, and it's great for Prize Picks, of course, you get a 100% deposit match by using promo code OrangeBloods by signing up. But a tip whenever you go there is what Ketch did there is he correlated his picks. That means what he's doing is he's saying, if I'm making the proposition that Quinn Ewers is going to go more than these yards, how is he going to go more than those yards? Well, there's only a few avenues for it to go through, right? These guys have to have big games. So what he's done is he's correlated those picks to where he's basically saying, I kind of just got to get one thing right here, and that's that the Texas passing game goes ham. Because if those guys have big games, Quinn is likely to have a big game and vice versa. But the rule on Prize Picks is you have to have at least one of your entries from another team or another sport or another game or something like that. It can't.
My other 2, Alex. Mm-hmm. I like Quentin Johnston. I mentioned to him previously what he did last week against Oklahoma State.
He finally got off the schneid a little bit. They don't.
He's had back-to-back huge games.
Yeah,
back-to-back. Like he's gone for over 175, I think, in each of the last 2 weeks. He's listed at 75.5 yards at home against Kansas State. I like the more there. And then staying with the theme of guys that I've seen so far this season, UTSA quarterback Frank Harris, he's been good for 300 yards. I think in either every game this season or every game but one this season. He's listed at 305.5 against North Texas. And North Texas has one of the worst pass efficiency defenses. They're like 1/10 in the country in pass efficiency D. So to go for, the big 10 times the win, I've got those 3 Texas plays, those 3 Texas entries, along with the Quentin Johnston receiving yards entry, the more, and more on the Frank Harris 305.5 passing yards entry.
I always bet more.
I do too.
I hardly ever bet less. And it's so bad because honestly, there's like the extra edge that's built in on taking the less, is there's always a chance that these guys get hurt. You know what I mean? Like there's always a chance like that. So it's like you're giving yourself an extra out by taking the less. That's what, in sport, this isn't sports betting, this is daily fantasy. But in sports betting, they will tell you, there's always better edge in the unders because players can get hurt or, things can go sideways. So, but I find myself, I like picking the ones where I can just root for these guys to score, more or to get the higher ones. Is that the case for you, Anwar? Do you take Moores generally, or do you throw in a less every now?
Moores generally, but last week, and if I go through some of my entries here, I actually took the less in one of the payoffs there, and it actually worked out for me. I took the less I took the less twice last week. I put a $15 power play in at 175. I went Grayson James, an FIU quarterback. He was at 186.5. I took the less on him. I took more on Tanner Mordecai, and I took less on Frank Harris for the passing yards. They had it at 340.5, and I just went less because they're playing FIU. And I was just like, at some point, he's going to have so many yards. I'm just going to pull him. And it's 340. I just thought it was too much, and he got 303. So actually twice, and within that winner, I took the less and actually won last week.
Alex, it'll warm your heart to know that so I had about 10 entries in last week. Yeah. The only time I missed, both in college and pro, is when I went with the less. All of my mores last week hit. I went less on Caleb Williams throwing for 300.5 passing and rushing yards. He had like 438. I like, if I'm going to get it wrong, I like getting it way wrong. So at least I don't have to sweat it out. That was the only thing that kept me from hitting a 5-for-5er because I got everything else right. And that was a multi-sport entry pick that I had. I went less with Xavier Hutchinson catches last week against the Longhorns. I had him at less than 8.5. I felt really good about that.
It's a bad call by me. But what do you get, 10?
Yeah.
9 or 10. Golly, that would screw me too.
I had less on the Max Duggan fantasy points. It was listed at 28. I had that right, and then the game went into overtime, and then he got the more, which seemed completely unfair. I went less on Hendon Hooker in passing yards against Alabama.
I don't think that went well for you.
It did not. It was
that guy Jalen Hyatt,
right?
Dude, that kid Jalen Hyatt. Did you see his final stat line? The 5 touchdown game.
Yeah,
it was just like he had played like five catches for 300 yards and like 4 touchdowns. I was just like, what kind of stat line is this?
I thought, look, 270 is a lot to play with. I thought Alabama would buckle down on defense, and they didn't. And then in the NFL, I went less on Ezekiel Elliott on Sunday night with 72.5 rushing and receiving yards. Missed that one, and it was the only thing that kept me going 5-for-5 on that 5 entry pick. And those were literally the only misses that I had all weekend long, and they were all lesses. Because I tried to mix it up, Alex, because I kept thinking I'm not taking advantage of what you just talked about with the less picks, and I totally whiffed. If I just kept doing mores, apparently I would have done really, really well.
Hey, Catch, wait. Speaking of Dugan, I'm looking at it right now. It's interesting. They played Kansas State. They got him down at 290.5 passing yards, or you could go 335 passing plus rushing.
I just don't feel great about either side of either of those. There's so many numbers that I like more than that I stayed. I saw those earlier when I was looking on Wednesday for something to pair up with those Texas entries. I don't know. I keep waiting for the clock to strike midnight on Max, and it hasn't happened so far. He is playing at home, but boy, those are some lofty numbers.
A lot. It's a lot against a decent defense.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, just a bad quarter might keep him from being able to hit those numbers. But like I said, I think your instincts on those are probably right. Me personally, I will stay away from Max Duggan after, quite frankly, missing on him a week ago.
By the way, you saw your boy Jalen Daniels practice this week, did you? Did you see that?
I did. He's going to be back for the Texas game.
Yeah.
I don't know if he'll be back for any game before that, but he's going to be back for Texas.
Yeah, so we'll see. I'm going to see. I'll be curious to see if you're back as bullish on him when he returns as you were, because he was.
I think in a Texas matchup, he'll do well.
Okay. All right, we'll see.
Although he's got the same injury in that shoulder. Like, they haven't gone out and given specifics, right? You mentioned it. It's like the end thing to do this year is to just not give injury updates on your key players.
Yeah.
I wonder if he'll be less of a true run threat because of the shoulder and them not wanting. It's like the concussion thing. There are some injuries or you'd like your quarterbacks to not be exposed to too many hits. So they may ask him to run less, which would obviously be a great thing for a Texas defense that won't want that smoke when they play that game. They may want Kansas. They may want to play that game, but they don't want to get into a try to beat us with your feet because he can. Anybody got anything else? We good?
Yeah, that's good there for me. I'll be doing some more examinations before the weekend.
I'll be a lot better after this weekend, man, after some of these 5-leggers hit, boys.
There we go. There we go. That 10 times is 10 times the fun. For myself, Anwar, Alex, and of course Prize Picks, who will match up to 100% of like your first deposit up to $100. Use that promo code Orange Bloods. I have finally turned into the daily fantasy player, but I love that I can just pick a player and go more or less, as opposed to I've always just stayed away from it because I didn't want to get into building the lineups and play. I love Prize Picks. It keeps it real simple and allows me to think I'm smarter than the game, which when you are, it feels great. More times than not, you're not. But nevertheless, it allows me to pick what I think are the surest entries. And sometimes they hit and sometimes they don't. But, yeah, I had a nice week. For myself, like I said, Alex and Anwar, we'll do this again next week, hopefully with nothing but green wins on the ledger. Yes. You guys have a great weekend. We'll see you on Saturday for the postgame show. Later.